This is Addison Smith with Campus Reform. We're joined today by the president of Speech First, Nicole Neely. Nicole, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time. We're going to jump right into some things that have been developing over at Syracuse University. You have begun a petition. I believe it was you that started a petition that's circulating now over some free speech issues that have been going on at Syracuse, particularly the idea of silence is violence, which is something that you insist is being increasingly weaponized against particularly freshman students. But even more than that, there's a new code in the student handbook that states that students could be in violation of policy if they engage in, quote, assistance, participation in, promotion of, or perpetuation of conduct, whether physical, electronic, oral, written, or video, which threatens the mental health, physical health, or safety of anyone. So right off the bat, anyone reading this should recognize that this sounds extremely vague. Could you expound on what the problem with this rule is and what negative impact it could have?
Sure. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is extremely vague. And so what is participation in? I mean, like the whole idea that somebody can be held and, disciplined for the idea of really being a bystander is kind of a terrifying thing because, there's a lot that could be going on. But again, this gives administrators broad discretionary power to determine, the idea of like, what is a bias incident? What is harassment? Who's interpreting those terms? And then, not only are they going to be able to decide kind of like based on viewpoint, what works and what doesn't, but also like the punishment for that. And so that's one of the reasons I think why the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education has named Syracuse over and over again as one of their 10 worst schools in the country for free speech. And what's ironic to me is that, Syracuse claims to believe in, support, and uphold principles of free speech and expression. And to me, policies like this show that they don't. This is a bait and switch. I mean, to me, you're lying to your customers, and I think students deserve better. So we just want to start to shine a light on that. This is hypocrisy.
And how long has this petition been circulating? How long have you been fighting against the administration over this?
Sure. So we just opened this up to our members about a week ago. And so we have, people have been signing as of today. We have nearly 2,500 people who have signed. Obviously it's been kind of a busy week with other things in the news. So we expect that we'll get a lot more. We sent a petition off to Tulane University, again, flagging concerns that we had there a few weeks ago because they have promised one thing, yet they're delivering a completely different experience. And when we sent that to Tulane, we had almost 7,500 people. And so we expect we'll have, a similarly large number when we send it to Syracuse.
And in addition to that petition, you also wrote a letter to Syracuse's chancellor, Kent, I'm going to mess up his last name, Severud, and you were urging him to reform 3 particular speech policies, obviously the one we just talked about, but also one called Syracuse's Stop Bias and Residential Bias Prevention Program, as well as a university events policy that you argue is too restricting on conservative students, for example, bringing in a speaker to host a speaker. So talk to us a little bit about those and the problems that you're seeing with those.
Sure. Bias response teams have been something that Speech First cares tremendously about, and we have litigated about, because in my mind, not only are they creepy, at public universities, they're unconstitutional. Syracuse obviously is a private institution, so they're able to kind of set the rules, the terms of engagement. But I think any school that has a program where you are encouraging students to, like, let's call it what it is, tattletale on each other, even if you're doing it with the best of intentions, where you want to create a sense of community, if students are being encouraged to report each other anonymously through an online portal, I think, more than anything, I think that undermines a sense of community. I would always be looking over my shoulder wondering who is around me who might force a report. And also, I think it teaches students, go and tell the grownups that there's a problem, not deal with somebody interpersonally, not, if you see an incident, intervene and do something about it, but go and tell the grownups, go and tell the cops, go and tell the government. If I see you doing or saying something that's inappropriate, it's kind of incumbent on me as a member of the community, as a human being, frankly, to step up and say, hey, don't talk to her that way. Or, why don't use words like that? But instead, students are encouraged to, stay quiet and then just file a report. And I think that's a really creepy thing to do.
Right, and to expound a little more on the university events policy with students having a hard time bringing in speakers, I've actually witnessed some of this firsthand. One of my friends who went to Syracuse, they were attempting to bring a while back Ben Shapiro to come in and speak, and the student government, the administration was all over it like war hawks, and they were making it virtually impossible for them to get that through. And I don't think he ended up coming. I think some of that might have that could be because of coronavirus. But are you seeing this? You know, you mentioned in the petition that 2 students have received death threats. I actually know both of those students personally. I've interviewed them. Leadership Institute's Campus Reform has covered those stories. So contrast that with these students receiving death threats, because to this day, I don't think the administration has done virtually anything about that particular incident. Contrast that with all of these precautions they're taking for this bias prevention, for these, you know, student code of conducts, versus people receiving legitimate death threats. And I spoke to both of them. They both have left Syracuse, left the public campus for fear of their safety. So, you know, seems to be a little bit going on there.
No, and it's a terrific point. I mean, the fact that Adrian and Justine, who are both, you know, they're fine, you know, they're lovely people, and that the school has done nothing. I mean, I think that speaks volumes. And I think that's something that, frankly, if I was a family who was considering sending my child and my money to Syracuse, and I knew that certain students were held up as important and valuable, and other students, based on their viewpoint, were not. I mean, Syracuse's inaction to me speaks volumes. And I think it's I think it's a horrifying message they've sent. You know, some people's opinions are worth more than others. And so, yeah, I mean, the fact that Syracuse still in their handbook claims, you know, to uphold free speech and dialogue, yet, I mean, when there are, you know, and the First Amendment is not like a blank check. There are certain things that are not permitted, period. And legitimate, you know, threats, you know, incitement to imminent lawful action. That's the kind of thing that is not okay. And the school doing nothing it's heartbreaking. These students deserve better.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, like you said, it isn't a blank check. You can't incite violence. You can't scream fire in a movie theater, for example. So you obviously, you know, you work at Speech First. I love the work you guys do over there, fighting for students' First Amendment rights across the country. Is this type of suppression something that you see happening throughout college campuses across the nation? Do you see it increasing more and more, day by day, month by month? And also, you know, we're seeing these kind of codes of conduct being updated. What do you think is coming next? And obviously, with coronavirus, there's a whole new element with virtual learning. Where do you see the future of students' First Amendment rights going on college campuses?
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously the election is a big question mark, because who knows what the Department of Education might look like under a Biden-Harris administration. I mean, I've seen, you know, the short list of education secretaries listing people like Randy Weingarten, people like Elizabeth Warren. I mean, that's going to be a very different Department of Education than we currently have under Secretary DeVos. I do think that, in my mind, the greatest threat to free speech on campus right now is this chilling. It's this self-censorship. No university, be it public or private, is frankly dumb enough to come out and flat out ban conservative speech, Catholic speech, you know, religious speech, because they know that they would be challenged and they'd lose. So what we see on campuses, you know, big and small, is they use speech codes like the ones that we're raising, that we're questioning at Syracuse, that we've challenged in our lawsuits against places like the University of Texas, where they'll ban offensive speech, biased speech, bigoted speech. I mean, that all sounds, you know, well and good. But again, it's so broad, it's so vague that students don't know what they can be in trouble for. That's very dependent on who receives the report. Is it somebody who is a Bernie Sanders supporter and thinks that, you know what, saying that there are 2 genders is like, yes, that's hate speech and you've just dehumanized people on campus? Or is it somebody who actually understands the Constitution and realizes, you know what, that might be an opinion I disagree with, but it's still permitted? You know, students shouldn't be subject to that kind of broad discretion. There are very clear lines that cannot and should not be crossed, but if students are in a position where they don't know what they can be in trouble for, and then their campus, like Syracuse or University of Michigan, for example, have bias response teams in place, they're put in a position where they can get in trouble at any time because someone might tell on them anytime. I mean, I think maybe Campus Reform last year reported on a student at the university, or at Michigan State University. A bias response report was filed against him for watching a Ben Shapiro video in his dorm room. I mean, if you are not able to watch a political video behind closed doors, where are you allowed to do these things? And so students are in a position where if you get in trouble for anything, anytime, anywhere, I'm not surprised that they are keeping their mouths shut. No, out of an abundance of caution, nobody wants to deal with the hassle of being called into a disciplinary hearing, even if it's just to scare you. This is meant to send a message not only to the student who's called in, but to all of their peers. Talk about these things, raise these issues, and you will end up being punished by the process. It's a scary thing. If you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you're not advised of your rights, you don't have a lawyer with you, you don't know that these are voluntary. And on a lot of these campuses, failing to comply with an order from a school is cause for discipline in and of its own, on its own. So yeah, more than anywhere else in the country is where students should be able to debate, discuss hot political issues. I mean, we can talk about gender and politics on CNN, yet we can't do it on a college campus. I mean, it is so expensive right now, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to recite talking points and keep your mouth shut. It's unacceptable, and I will not let this happen.
Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is that college campuses are supposed to be a place where you can go and be challenged with dissenting viewpoints, and time will only tell how that continues to unfold and how that continues to be suppressed. But Nicole, love the work you guys are doing at Speech First. Keep fighting the good fight, and you'll have to keep us updated on how this battle's going at Syracuse, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.